The gravel crunched under the tires, a sound swallowed instantly by the vast, oppressive silence. Blackwood Manor rose from the mist-shrouded earth like a skeletal hand, its gables sharp against the bruised Pacific Northwest sky. I killed the engine, and the sudden quiet was a physical thing, pressing in on my ears, a thick, damp blanket. For months, the idea of this place had been my anchor. A fresh start, an escape from the hushed condolences and pitying glances that followed me like a shadow. My great-aunt Alara, God rest her reclusive soul, had left me everything. Everything. Meaning this sprawling, decaying monument to her peculiar life. This wasn't just old. It felt ancient, burdened by forgotten seasons. A gust of wind, smelling faintly of something fungal, ruffled my hair. I pulled my worn jacket tighter. It was a stark contrast to the clatter and low hum of that temporary residence, a place I'd spent too much time in after the accident. I remembered the fluorescent lights, the bland, recycled air, the insistent low murmur of other confined souls. I remembered the designated meal times, the clinking of cutlery on plastic trays, the muffled conversations. I remembered the strange, almost claustrophobic quiet that would descend sometimes during the long nights, broken only by a distant cough or the creak of floorboards. It was during one of those interminable stretches, confined to the mess hall during lockdown after a minor disruption, that the estate lawyer's call had come through. The news of Alara's passing, the unexpected inheritance, it had felt like a lifeline, a chance to breathe, even if that breath was drawn in a place as desolate as this. It scraped against the lock plate, a high-pitched shriek that echoed unnervingly in the stillness. With a groan of protest, the door swung inward. Even with the afternoon light filtering weakly through the grimy windows, the entryway remained shrouded in gloom. It reminded me of a forgotten root cellar. My footsteps echoed on the grand, if somewhat buckling hardwood floor. The chandelier above, a grand iron beast, hung precariously, draped in cobwebs. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, a silent, swirling ballet. To my right, a door stood ajar, revealing what looked like a library. Bookshelves, stretching to the ceiling, were crammed with leather-bound volumes, many warped and discolored by moisture. A peculiar, almost sickly sweet odor emanated from within. I pushed the door open further, stepping inside. The air here was even thicker, the strange root cellar smell more potent. My gaze fell upon a heavy oak desk, laden with papers and what appeared to be botanical drawings. One drawing, pinned beneath a tarnished brass magnifying glass, depicted a plant I didn't recognize. Its tendrils were thick, almost muscular, with an intricate, almost Venus pattern on its leaves. The sketch was meticulous, obsessive, and beneath it, a small, leather-bound journal. I picked it up, the leather dry and cracked. Ilara's careful script filled the pages, faded ink on yellowed paper. Her entries at first were typical botanical observations, detailing species, growth patterns, soil conditions. But as I flipped through, the tone shifted. It thrives on the quiet, reaching, ever-reaching. My breath hitched. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. It wasn't just empty. It felt attentive. Was it my imagination, or was that strange, earthy smell intensifying? A faint, almost imperceptible vibration seemed to hum through the floorboards beneath my feet, a low, resonant thrum. Or perhaps it was just the house settling, groaning under the weight of its own decay. I told myself it was just the old house, playing tricks on my tired mind. But as I stood there, the journal heavy in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't just inherited a house. I'd walked into a vast, silent maw. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a deliberate quiet, as if the very air held its breath, listening. My skin prickled. I tried to shake off the irrational thought, telling myself it was just the old house settling, my nerves frayed from the journey and the strange circumstances. But the rationalizations felt thin, brittle. A faint whisper, like dry leaves skittering across flagstones, seemed to brush past my ear. I swiveled my head, scanning the towering bookshelves, the dusty busts, the heavy velvet drapes. Nothing. The sound was too ephemeral, too fleeting to pinpoint. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving only the familiar static gloom. It didn't convince me. Then came the creaking. Not the gentle groans of ancient timber cooling, but a rhythmic, deliberate shift, originating from somewhere above me, then moving. Creak, creak, creak. It was too regular, too intentional to be random. It sounded like footsteps, slow and heavy, moving through the floorboards directly overhead. My gaze shot to the ceiling, an ornate plaster affair that now seemed to loom. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the manor's steady, unseen pulse. I couldn't stay still. I pushed myself up from the armchair, the worn leather sighing beneath me. My determination to settle in and understand this place warred with a primal urge to flee. Curiosity, however, usually won. I had to see. I moved through the echoing halls, my footsteps surprisingly loud on the polished wood. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else. Something cloying and sweet, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. It grew stronger with every step, drawing me toward the rear of the manor. I passed grand, unused drawing rooms, their furniture shrouded in white sheets, like silent, hunched figures. The light here was almost entirely gone, absorbed by the heavy tapestries and the sheer volume of dust motes dancing in the meager shafts that pierced the gloom. Vines, thin and wiry, snaked out from beneath a closed, heavy oak door at the corridor's end, gripping the stone wall with a tenacious, living strength. This had to be it. Ilara's famous gardens, or rather the source of them. I pushed the door open. This wasn't just a room. It was a cathedral of plant life, a vast glass-domed conservatory that stretched further than I could have imagined. Every surface was consumed. Towering ferns with fronds like ancient wings brushed against the glass ceiling. Flowers, unlike any I'd ever seen, bloomed in impossible colors, deep purples, iridescent blues, vibrant oranges, their petals unfurling in complex, almost architectural patterns. The air thrummed with the buzz of unseen insects and the steady drip of condensation, creating a constant low murmur. It was unsettlingly beautiful, a place of wild, untamed growth that felt both sacred and profane. The earthy, sweet scent here was overwhelming, almost intoxicating, and beneath it, a faint metallic tang. The light, filtered through layers of leaves and the grime-coated glass, was a murky emerald. It felt like walking into the belly of some colossal living thing. It wasn't words, not exactly, but a chorus of sibilant sounds, a rustling, a breathing, a deep, collective sigh. My eyes scanned the dense foliage. There were no paths, just tunnels of growth. Some of the plants seemed to pulse faintly, a subtle shift in their color, a slow, almost imperceptible unfurling of a new tendril. It was then that I noticed the smaller, more insidious growths. Delicate, almost translucent filaments like fine spider silk, stretched between branches, glistening wetly. Some were embedded directly into the stone walls, disappearing into hairline cracks. Others wove through the glass panes, creating intricate organic patterns. They weren't just on the plants. They were part of the structure itself. A sudden, sharp rustle directly behind me made me jump, my breath catching in my throat. I spun around, heart hammering. But the sound had been too loud, too deliberate for a simple falling leaf. It had sounded like something moving, something heavy brushing against the dense vegetation. I stared into the green wall, my senses on high alert. This wasn't just an old house. This was something else entirely. Something alive. I needed to get out. I burst back through the heavy oak door, slamming it shut behind me with a resounding thud that echoed down the silent corridor. I leaned against it, gasping, my chest heaving. The earthy, sweet scent of the conservatory still clung to me, a sickening perfume. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just seen, what I had felt. I wandered aimlessly, my steps quickening, a frantic search for solid ground in this shifting, breathing labyrinth. The air here smelled of old metal and institutional disinfectant, a strange contrast to the organic decay above. I pushed open another door, finding myself in a long, low-ceilinged room. Bare metal tables, scarred and stained, stretched down its length, flanked by rows of overturned wooden chairs. This was a mess hall, clearly long abandoned, stripped of any warmth or purpose. Fluorescent light fixtures, long dead, hung crookedly from the ceiling. This was the quiet of disuse, of forgotten functionality, and it felt profoundly isolating. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the entire house had finally cornered me. The doors I had passed seemed to recede, the windows too high and grimy to offer escape. It wasn't the kind of quiet that suggested emptiness, but rather a held breath, a pause before something began. My breath hitched, a small, involuntary sound in the vast silence. Earthy, yes, but also sweet, with a cloying undertone that reminded me of overripe fruit left too long in the sun. It was an inviting smell, yet deeply wrong, like a lure. It pulled at me, a subtle thread tugging me away from the grand staircase and towards a lesser-used corridor, one I hadn't properly explored. The floorboards here groaned beneath my weight with a more ominous complaint, as if protesting my intrusion. I passed a series of closed doors, their paint peeling like sun-blistered skin, until I reached one that stood out. It was a heavy oak door, reinforced with thick iron bands, and secured not just with a deadbolt, but with a massive rusted padlock that looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades. This wasn't just a closed room, it was a sealed one. Curiosity, or perhaps that strange pull, urged me forward. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the padlock. It was old, but the hasp felt surprisingly loose. With a grunt, I twisted it, and to my surprise, the ancient rust gave way with a protesting screech, the padlock falling into my palm with a dull clunk. The bolt slid back with a groan. The air that rushed out was stale, heavy with the scent of old wood and something vaguely metallic. Long tables, stripped bare of any setting, stretched into the gloom, their surfaces scarred and grimy. Chairs lay overturned or stacked haphazardly, as if abandoned in a hurry. The windows along one wall were boarded up, letting in only slivers of weak light that highlighted motes of dust dancing in the stagnant air. A large, blackened hearth dominated one end, its chimney throat gaping like a silent scream. It felt less like a room and more like a tomb, sealed off from the living world, its purpose suspended indefinitely. My breath caught in my throat and I backed out, pulling the heavy door shut with a soft click, leaving the mess hall to its desolate vigil. The sickly sweet, earthy scent intensified as I moved deeper into the corridor beyond the mess hall, now almost overwhelming the mustiness of the old manor. Ahead, a faint greenish glow pulsed from around a corner. I followed it, my steps growing lighter, a strange eagerness overriding the unease. And then I saw it, the conservatory. It wasn't just a room. It was a colossal glass dome, a vast skeletal ribcage of iron and glass tacked onto the side of the manor, sprawling outwards like some monstrous glittering carbuncle. Even from the entrance, I could see the chaos within. A riot of green and purple and impossible crimson, pressing against the glass, obscuring the sky. A heavy, ornate door, caked with verdigris, marked the entrance. It creaked open with a sigh that seemed to resonate through the very structure. The air inside hit me like a physical wall. Hot, humid, thick with the cloying, sweet, earthy scent that had drawn me here. It was a jungle, untamed and aggressive, under glass. Plants I had never seen before coiled and twined, their leaves glossy and unnaturally vibrant, some with a fleshy thickness that seemed to pulse. Tendrils, thick as a man's arm, snaked across the floor, their tips blind and searching. Some plants wept a thick, sap-like liquid onto the stone path, which was slick with it. The air was alive with the soft drip, drip, drip of condensation, the rustle of leaves that seemed to shift even in the still air, and a low, almost imperceptible hum that vibrated in my chest. It was beautiful, in a horrifying alien way. It took a moment, hidden beneath a canopy of broad, purple-veined leaves, but I finally spotted a small, overturned wooden desk. A chair lay nearby, splintered. It looked as though someone had left in a hurry, or perhaps been removed. With a shiver, I pushed away the encroaching growth. The books were Alara's journals. Her elegant, spidery handwriting filled the pages, but as I flipped through them, the script grew more erratic, frantic even. The early entries were detailed botanical observations, precise drawings of flora, but then they began to shift. "The root takes hold," one entry read, dated years ago. "It reaches, it hungers." Another, more recent, scrawled in a hand that was barely legible. "The growth is undeniable. It demands. It reshapes. I am merely tending." My eyes darted around the conservatory. The plants, previously just strange, now seemed menacing. There was that vine tightening around the leg of the desk. Did the fleshy leaves above me just quiver? A new host. The manor breathes with it. The garden. I wasn't just in a greenhouse. I was in a living, breathing entity, a vast, intricate network. And Alara, my great-aunt, hadn't just been tending a garden. He had been nurturing something that had a name, a purpose, and now, perhaps, a new appetite. The hum in the air seemed to intensify, and the sweet, cloying scent suddenly felt less inviting and more suffocating. The words from Alara's journal had burrowed deep, twisting like roots in the fertile soil of my mind. A living entity. A purpose. It wasn't just a garden. It was a vast, intricate network, and I was standing in its heart. My skin tingled, a phantom touch, as if the very walls were exhaling. Alara was eccentric, a recluse. Perhaps her final writings were the ramblings of a fading mind. But the evidence of the greenhouse, the strange, pulsing veins beneath the floorboards, the unnerving sensation of being watched, it all coalesced into a chilling certainty. This place was alive. I paced the study, my boots muffled by the thick Persian rug. Each shadow seemed to deepen, each creak of the ancient house more pronounced. My reflection stared back from the polished marble mantelpiece, a pale, anxious face. As I watched, a flicker, a subtle shift, warped my features. My eyes, usually a clear blue, seemed to deepen, the pupils elongating, stretching into something less human, more botanical. I blinked, hard, and the illusion vanished, leaving only my own startled gaze. It was just a trick of the light, fatigue playing games with my vision. It had to be. I spun around, scanning the room, but there was nothing. Just the familiar shelves packed with leather-bound tomes, the heavy velvet drapes, the imposing oak desk. Nothing, and yet everything. A heavy book, a treatise on rare fungi, slid from a top shelf with a soft thud, landing open on the rug. I stared at it, then at the empty space it had occupied. There was no draft, no vibration. It had simply fallen. I walked over, my steps hesitant, and picked it up. Its pages were brittle, yellowed. I dropped it again, a gasp escaping my lips. This was no longer a matter of interpretation. The house was awake, and it was playing with me. Anyone. The detective I'd spoken to briefly after Alara's death a colleague from my old life, even just a friend to ground me in reality. I pulled out my phone, the sleek rectangle feeling utterly useless in my trembling hand. No signal. I tried again, moving to the window, then to the doorway. Nothing. Not even a single bar. The internet, I remembered, had been spotty since I arrived, but now the Wi-Fi icon was completely gone. Dead. I wasn't just cut off, I was being cut off. The house was severing my ties to the outside world, pulling me deeper into its confines. I rushed to the main entrance, fumbling with the heavy bolt. It slid back with a grating shriek, but the massive oak door, usually so responsive, felt like it was fused to the frame. I pushed, leaned my shoulder into it, grunting with effort. It wouldn't budge. It was as if the wood had swelled, grown into its own casing, sealing me in. No one would hear. No one would come. My mind reeled, grasping for a foothold in a world that was rapidly dissolving around me. The wood felt strangely warm against my skin, pulsing faintly. A low hum vibrated through the door, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to sink into my bones. Then, the foyer around me began to waver. The grand staircase, the ornate chandelier, the dim oil paintings. They blurred, the edges softening, melting like wax. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of stale cooking oil and something metallic, like old blood. The opulent gloom of Blackwood Manor receded, replaced by a harsh, unflinching light. Suddenly, I wasn't in the foyer anymore. I was standing on a floor of cracked linoleum under the unforgiving glare of flickering fluorescent tubes. Long, rectangular tables, bolted to the floor, stretched out before me, their surfaces scarred with countless forgotten carvings. Plastic chairs were stacked neatly on top, awaiting some unseen signal. The walls were bare cinder block, painted a dull, institutional beige. No windows, no doors, just a single heavy steel door at the far end, marked with a faded red exit sign. This wasn't Blackwood Manor. This was somewhere else. A wave of nausea swept over me, and I clutched my head, trying to make sense of the jarring shift. Was I losing my mind? Had the house finally broken through the last vestiges of my sanity? The fluorescent lights buzzed, a high, irritating whine that seemed to bore directly into my brain. The smell of disinfectant was overwhelming. I could almost hear the clatter of trays, the murmur of hushed voices, the shuffling of feet. I was trapped, not just in the manor, but in this awful, sterile vision, a prison of the mind. Just as quickly as it had appeared, the illusion fractured. The hum from the wood had intensified, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the entire structure. The house hadn't just closed in, it had consumed me, chewed me up, and spat me back out, leaving me shaken and terrified, utterly alone in its suffocating embrace. It wanted me here, and it was showing me what it could do if I resisted. I was no longer an inhabitant. I was prey. This wasn't Blackwood Manor. This was somewhere else. A place of absolute confinement, of stark, dehumanizing control. Was I losing it? I bolted upright, gasping, my breath ragged in the cool air of my bedroom. The heavy velvet curtains were still drawn, plunging the room into a deep, artificial twilight. Sweat slicked my forehead, and the taste of bile lingered in my mouth. It had been so real, the sense of being trapped, the low, guttural murmur of unseen guards just beyond the locked doors. I could still hear the clatter of a dropped tray, amplified and distorted, echoing in the vast, sterile space. But I wasn't there. I was here, in the vast, dusty silence of Blackwood Manor, the old bed groaning beneath me. My vision swam for a moment, the ornate wallpaper seeming to ripple like water. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, trying to clear the lingering fog of the dream. The wallpaper settled, its faded floral pattern returning to staid stillness. Just a bad dream, I told myself, a particularly vivid one. The isolation here was getting to me. It was a new sensation, or perhaps I was just noticing it now, filtering it through the haze of my unsettled mind. I walked to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain. Outside, the Pacific Northwest morning was shrouded in a thick, wet fog, the ancient pines dissolving into a gray blur. As I made coffee, the hum grew a fraction louder, a subtle pressure against my eardrums. I found myself staring at a crack in the kitchen wall, a hairline fracture that snaked up towards the ceiling. I leaned closer, my gaze fixed on the spot. Nothing. Just an old crack, dust motes dancing in the weak morning light. My imagination, frayed by the dream. I needed to understand them, to document them, to prove to myself that they were just unusual botany, not something insidious. The cloying sweetness intensified, layered now with a sharp, almost metallic tang. The hum was undeniable here, a low, resonant drone that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the world was a riot of unnatural green and purple. The air was thick with humidity, clinging to my skin. The growths had spread further than I remembered, tendrils snaking across the floor, up the glass panes, their fleshy petals unfurling in silent, slow motion. The entire space seemed to breathe, a subtle expansion and contraction that made the very ground beneath my feet feel alive. And then I saw it. Nestled amongst a cluster of broad, heart-shaped leaves, a single glowing orb pulsed with an ethereal blue light. It was roughly the size of a plum, its surface slick and iridescent, like polished obsidian. It pulsed, a soft, rhythmic glow that seemed to synchronize with the hum in the air, with the beating of my own heart. It was a spore, I realized, a perfect, self-contained little world of light. A strange, undeniable pull seized me. It wasn't curiosity, not entirely. It was a deeper, more primal urge. A quiet whisper in the back of my mind that told me I needed it. My hand, without conscious thought, reached out. The air around it felt cool, almost electric. The hum intensified, vibrating through my entire body. My mind screamed at me to recoil, to step back, to leave the alien thing untouched. This was wrong. This was dangerous. But the compulsion was overwhelming, a silent, insistent command that overrode all reason. My fingers closed around the spore. It was cool and smooth, surprisingly light, yet it felt as if it contained immense weight, immense power. The blue light pulsed against my palm, a steady, captivating rhythm. I held it, mesmerized, feeling the pulse reverberate up my arm, into my chest, a new alien beat alongside my own. The sweet, cloying scent became intoxicating, drawing me deeper into its embrace. I looked at the glowing spore in my hand, and I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I couldn't let it go. It was a part of me now. My head throbbed, a dull, insistent drumbeat that echoed the frantic pulse against my ribs. The air was thick, metallic, and carried the stale scent of disinfectant mixed with something vaguely institutional. My eyes struggled to focus, the harsh fluorescent lights above casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. This wasn't the library. This wasn't Blackwood Manor. I was sitting on a hard plastic chair, bolted to the floor. Before me, a long, scarred table stretched out, its surface etched with forgotten initials and crude drawings. Around me, rows of identical tables and chairs filled a vast, echoing space. The walls were painted a faded, peeling green, and high up, small, grimy windows were barred, letting in only a faint, diffused light. A clock, its face cracked, hung crookedly on one wall, its hands frozen at 3:15. The phrase echoed in my mind, a chilling pronouncement that felt both alien and terrifyingly familiar. A sudden, jarring clang from somewhere down a corridor made me flinch, my muscles tensing. My breath hitched in my throat. I could hear hushed, shuffling sounds, the distant scrape of something heavy being dragged. A low, guttural moan seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. What was this place? How did I get here? Was I losing it? Was this a dream? A nightmare? The smell, the cold, hard chair, the pervasive sense of confinement? It was all too real. I pushed against the table, trying to stand, but my legs felt heavy, unresponsive. Panic began to claw at my throat. Then, as quickly as it had materialized, the mess hall wavered. The harsh light flickered. The green walls bled into the familiar, dust-laden oak of the library. The clang, the moan, the shuffling, all faded into the background hum of the old house. I blinked, my vision blurring, then clearing. I was back. Or had I ever left? My hand was still gripping the spine of Alara's largest journal, my knuckles white. The leather felt cool and smooth under my fingers, a stark contrast to the rough plastic I'd just imagined. The experience had been so vivid, so utterly convincing. It wasn't just the house. It was in my head, twisting what I saw, what I felt. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself, and forced my attention back to the journal. The last entry I'd been reading was dated years after the initial hopeful observations. Ilara's handwriting had deteriorated, becoming frantic, slanting wildly across the page. Words were underlined multiple times, sometimes scratched out and rewritten with furious intensity. They speak, not with words, not as we understand them, but with vibrations, with the turning of leaves, the unfolding of petals. A language of growth, of yearning. The root system. It is the network. It listens. Her entries grew increasingly disjointed, peppered with strange symbols I couldn't decipher. Intricate spiraling patterns that seemed to mimic the tendrils I'd seen snaking through the manor's foundations. They are hungry. Always hungry. The soil is not enough. The sun is not enough. Blackwood. It demands more. It needs sustenance. A different kind? I thought of the strangely fertile patches in the overgrown gardens, the unnatural vibrancy of certain plants. I have given them what they ask, small offerings at first, from the garden, the forest. They thrive, they pulse with a new vitality. And they share. Oh, how they share. Secrets of the earth, of life, of continuation. But the giving must be continuous. Her language was becoming increasingly cult-like, devotional. She wasn't just observing. He was serving. The manor breathes with them. It is one with the root. Its walls murmur. Its timbers creak not from age, but from contentment. It is digesting, assimilating. And I am part of it now. I understand its needs. I feel its pulse in my own veins. I recoiled slightly from the page, a knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just a botanist's eccentric ramblings. This was the unraveling of a mind, intertwined with something monstrous. Ilara hadn't simply been tending a garden. He had been feeding a living, growing entity. An entity that had consumed her, mind and body, and was now reaching out, its tendrils seeking a new host. The air in the library suddenly felt heavy, charged. The old house seemed to sigh, a low, drawn-out sound that vibrated through the floorboards, up into my chair. Was it contentment? Or was it anticipation? The old gardener warned me, called it the deep root, said it would take everything. He was right, in a way. It has taken everything, but it has given me understanding. It has opened my eyes, and soon it will open the eyes of others. It will spread, it will claim. It is the future. The old gardener, the one who had disappeared. Ilara wasn't just mad, he was complicit. She believed in this thing, this deep root, this sentient plant network that demanded sustenance. And he had willingly, enthusiastically participated in its horrifying growth. The plants weren't just botanical specimens. They were something predatory, something ancient and malevolent, lurking beneath Blackwood Manor, slowly, methodically, consuming everything. And now, it was my turn. The mess hall. It was already starting. I was the next offering. It wasn't just the lack of human noise. It was a deeper, more profound quiet, as if the very air had thickened, absorbing sound. I could still feel the phantom echo of Alara's frantic scrawl in my mind, the chilling certainty of her devotion to the deep root. My great-aunt wasn't merely a recluse. He was a zealot, a willing participant in something monstrous. And now, I was trapped in her lair, the manor's internal mechanisms having sealed off the exits hours ago, a slow, deliberate tightening of its ancient grip. The old pantry, which abutted this very mess hall. The air itself seemed to hum with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. A pulse I was beginning to associate with the manor's unsettling vitality. There was no obvious seam, no handle, just solid rock. I remembered another note, a fleeting reference to the heart below, accessed by the oldest stone, turned by the weight of truth. Nonsense, I'd thought, until now. I pressed my palms against the cool surface, pushing, pulling, feeling for any give. Nothing. It was near the floor, half hidden by a stack of empty crates. I knelt, scraping away decades of dust and grime. There, etched faintly into the stone, was a single spiraling symbol, reminiscent of a coiled tendril. I pressed my thumb against it, then my palm. The stone remained unyielding. The weight of truth. Was it literal? I stood, looking around the pantry. My gaze fell on a heavy cast-iron skillet, thick with grease, sitting on a high shelf. It was the heaviest thing I could find. Taking a breath, I swung the skillet, not violently, but with a deliberate, firm strike against the symbol. The sound was dull, a heavy thud that seemed to be swallowed by the silent room. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low grinding sound deep within the walls vibrated up through the floorboards. The section of stone I'd struck began to recede. Slowly, silently, revealing a narrow, lightless opening. This was it. The air grew heavier, warmer, saturated with the sickly sweet scent. It pulsed with the same rhythm I felt in the air, a slow, organic thump, thump. The descent felt endless, the passage twisting and turning, becoming narrower, then suddenly opening into small, cramped caverns before constricting again. The roots grew thicker, more numerous, forming grotesque, interwoven tapestries that dripped a viscous, clear liquid onto the floor. I felt my boot slip on something wet and slick, catching myself against a spongy, moss-like growth that clung to the wall. It felt strangely warm, yielding beneath my touch. Finally, the tunnel widened dramatically. The rhythmic thrumming intensified, vibrating through my bones, a deep, guttural pulse. My flashlight beam stretched out, failing to find the far wall of what was clearly an enormous subterranean chamber. Then, I saw it. A sickly, phosphorescent glow permeated the vast cavern, emanating from everywhere and nowhere. It painted the space in shades of unearthly green and violet. Before me, stretching into the gloom, was a sprawling, pulsating network of roots and fungal growths. They were colossal, thicker than ancient tree trunks, weaving together into a grotesque, organic cathedral. Some were glistening rope-like tendrils that hung from the unseen ceiling, dripping that same viscous fluid onto the cavern floor, where it pooled in shallow bioluminescent puddles. Others were bulbous, fleshy growths, some the size of small cars, clustered together like diseased organs, their surfaces slick and moist. And at the very heart of this immense living labyrinth, a central mass, an enormous pulsating sack of interwoven roots and fungal matter, glowed with an intensified hypnotic rhythm. It was alive. It was breathing. This wasn't just a root system. This was the true heart of Blackwood Manor. Alara hadn't just tended a garden. He had tended this. The air around me seemed to thicken further, the strange, sweet scent growing cloying, almost suffocating. The rhythmic pulsing intensified, speeding up, and I could have sworn the giant roots around me twitched, subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if sensing my presence. I was deep within its domain now, a trespasser, and I was very, very alone. Each step I took down the winding, uneven stairs seemed to deepen the hum, turning it from a vibration in my chest to a resonant thrumming that echoed in my bones. What little light managed to penetrate the upper levels of Blackwood Manor certainly wasn't reaching down here. The stairs finally gave way to a rough-hewn corridor, wider than I expected, its walls slick with a dark, glistening residue. The air here was even heavier, saturated with a damp, earthy smell that warred with the cloying sweetness. I pressed on, my boots squelching slightly with each step. My head began to ache, a dull throb behind my eyes. The corridor opened into a vast, cavernous space. The windows, high up and small, were completely boarded over from the inside with thick planks of rotting wood, and the heavy metal doors leading out were chained and padlocked, the locks corroded with rust. It was a place designed to keep things in, or perhaps keep things out. I stood there, surrounded by the decay and the overwhelming presence of whatever festered here, and the thrumming became a roar in my ears. My vision blurred. The green light from the growths intensified, washing over everything, painting the scene in an eerie alien hue. The air, already thick, seemed to solidify, pressing in on me, stealing the breath from my lungs. Then it began. The mess hall dissolved, replaced by a flash of chrome and shattered glass. I was back in the mangled wreckage, the smell of burnt rubber and something metallic filling my nostrils. The faces, oh God, the faces. They were there, fleeting, contorted in agony, but their features were shifting, melting. The skin stretched, growing taut, then split, revealing tendrils of that same velvety growth, pulsing with green light. The driver's seat, where a loved one had been, wasn't a seat anymore, but a gnarled, twisted root system, its branches reaching out, grasping. I heard a scream, high and piercing, and it took me a moment to realize it was my own. I stumbled back, tripping over an unseen obstacle, landing hard on the grimy floor of the mess hall. The vision flickered, the wrecked car momentarily overlaying the fungal-infested tables. The thrumming shifted. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a sensation, a current running through my veins. I felt the slow, deliberate pulse of the manor, not as an external force, but as something inside me. It was a terrifying intimacy. My fingers, pressed against the damp floor, felt the subtle vibrations of the organic matter beneath. It was as if the manor was not just a place, but an enormous sentient organism, and I was being drawn into its vast, intricate network. Another vision slammed into me. My eyes glowed with that unsettling green light. I was standing in a vast subterranean chamber, surrounded by countless other figures, all similarly transformed, their bodies intertwined with monstrous roots. We were all connected, part of something immense and ancient, something that pulsed with a slow, hungry rhythm. And in the center of it all, a colossal, throbbing heart of pure, unadulterated organic matter. The root. A strange warmth spread through me. Not unpleasant, a sense of belonging I hadn't felt since before the tragedy. It was a profound, terrifying comfort, a feeling of being understood, of being home. My mind reeled. This wasn't just a house. It was a living entity, vast and hungry, and it was offering me a place within its endless embrace. It was the ultimate escape, a surrender to something greater, something that would numb the pain, erase the memories, and make me one with its ancient purpose. But that purpose felt wrong, inherently wrong. It was a seduction of the mind, a promise of peace that tasted of obliteration. I tried to pull away, to fight the insidious pull, but the connection felt too strong. It was like trying to sever a limb that had always been there. The thrumming in my head intensified, pushing against my skull, threatening to crack it open. My past tragedy, the grief that had driven me here, was now a tool in the Manor's arsenal. A lever to pry open my sanity and welcome me into its fold. The mess hall around me seemed to writhe in sympathy with my internal struggle. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the visions, to regain some semblance of control. But the images were seared into my mind, the feeling of belonging a terrifying anchor. The line between myself and the Manor blurred, eroding my sense of self, threatening to consume me entirely. The hum intensified with every step, no longer a mere vibration but a full-body resonance. Like the world itself was a gigantic, vibrating bell and I was trapped inside its clapper. The air grew thick, not just with the cloying sweetness, but with something else. A metallic tang, like old blood or rust or both. I descended deeper, the uneven stairs twisting into a spiral that seemed to have no end, only a suffocating downward pull. Then, just as the dizzying descent threatened to buckle my knees, the floor beneath my feet leveled out, abruptly. I stumbled forward, the beam of my light sweeping across a vast, cavernous space. It wasn't a basement. It was a mess hall, but not like any I'd ever seen. The room stretched out, dimly lit by a sickly green luminescence that pulsed from the organic growths clinging to every surface. Long skeletal tables, once wooden, were now petrified, fused with thick, ropey tendrils that snaked across their tops and down to the floor. Chairs, overturned and broken, were similarly entombed, their forms barely discernible beneath layers of glistening fungal matter. The air here was heavy, pressing down on me, thick with the cloying scent, now mixed with something acrid and rotten, like a forgotten meal left to ferment for decades. And I was the only one here. The lockdown wasn't a metaphor. As my light swung around, I saw that what might have once been doorways were now completely sealed by an impenetrable curtain of interwoven roots and pulsating fleshy membranes. The windows, if there ever were any, were long gone, replaced by the solid, breathing wall of the Manor itself. I was trapped. A sudden, sharp clang echoed from the far end of the room, cutting through the omnipresent hum. My head snapped around, flashlight beam darting. There, half buried under a mound of glistening tendrils, was a metal cart, its wheels rusted, a collection of tarnished utensils scattered around it. Ilara. I moved carefully, picking my way over the gnarled floor. Each step felt like walking on a living thing. The ground soft and spongy in places, unyielding and bony in others. The green light intensified as I approached the cart, revealing more of the journal. It was old, its pages brittle, but the scrawled handwriting was undeniably Ilara's. I knelt, pulling at the journal, trying to free it from the clinging tendrils. They felt cold, strangely damp against my fingers. As I tugged, a section of the wall behind the cart seemed to flex, the green light there pulsing brighter, faster. I ignored it, desperate to get my hands on the journal. This was it, the truth, the answers. Finally, with a soft ripping sound, the journal came free. I flipped it open, the pages resisting, some fused together, others crumbling at my touch. The handwriting was erratic, sometimes precise, sometimes a frantic scrawl. I scanned the lines, my eyes wide. The integration is imperfect. The host rejects. Too much consciousness. Must find a way to quiet the mind. The garden demands sustenance. Not just water and soil, but life. Not just plants. It wanted me. This place, this mess hall, it wasn't just a forgotten room. It was a processing chamber. A place where Ilara had tried to prepare hosts for the entity. The lockdown wasn't just physical confinement. It was a ritual. A low growl rumbled through the room, not from the manor's hum, but from the depths of the organic matter around me. The tendrils I'd pulled the journal from lashed out, thin and whip-like, wrapping around my wrist. They were surprisingly strong, biting into my skin like thin wires. I cried out, dropping the journal. "No!" I yelled, my voice a pathetic croak against the manor's growing roar. This thing, this entity, it wasn't going to take me. It wasn't going to turn me into some grotesque living root. My gaze landed on one of the petrified table legs, thick and heavy, partially broken away from its tabletop. With a surge of desperate strength, I wrenched it free. It came away with a sickening crack, spraying dust and desiccated plant matter. The wood felt heavy, solid, a weapon. I spun, facing the wall where the tendrils had emerged, where the green light pulsed most intensely. "You want me?" I snarled, my voice raw. "You're going to have to fight for me." With a guttural yell, I brought the table leg down, smashing it into the thickest, most pulsating part of the wall growth. A viscous amber liquid erupted, spraying across my face and clothes. It smelled of decay and something metallic, hot on my skin. The impact sent a shudder through the entire room, and the hum intensified to a deafening shriek. More tendrils, thicker this time, shot out from the damaged wall like angry serpents. They wrapped around my legs, my waist, pulling me off balance. I struggled, flailing with the table leg, striking blindly at the writhing mass. Each blow met with a sickening wet thud, and more of the amber liquid oozed forth. But for every tendril I severed, 2 more seemed to burst from the walls, faster, stronger. The green light pulsed wildly now, casting grotesque, shifting shadows that danced around me. I saw faces in the swirling growths, fleeting, distorted visages, their mouths open in silent screams. My great-aunt Alara's face, twisted in agony, appeared for a horrifying second, then dissolved back into the writhing mass. Was it an illusion? Or was she, too, part of this monstrous garden? The air grew impossibly thick, like breathing through wet soil. My lungs burned, starved for oxygen. The tendrils tightened their grip, lifting me slowly, inexorably off the ground. My head swam, the roar in my ears overwhelming my own ragged breaths. I thrashed, desperate, but my movements were sluggish, my strength draining away. The table leg slipped from my grasp, clattering to the ground. Emergency lights, a sickly yellow, cast long, wavering shadows that danced with every tremor from the house's ancient foundations. I sat hunched over a scarred wooden table, my fingers tracing the raised grain, the chill seeping into my bones despite the oppressive humidity. The heavy steel door, now sealed shut by the manor's own will, loomed behind me. A stark, unyielding barrier. No escape, not yet. My eyes scanned the single tattered journal splayed open before me. It was Alara's final entry, tucked away in a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard in the pantry. A place I'd found only after days of frantic, desperate searching. I'd read them a dozen times already, each pass deepening the pit in my stomach. It calls to me, not with malice, but with a promise of belonging, of a final peace. The gardeners, they misunderstood. They fought it, pruned it, tried to contain it. Foolish. You cannot contain a will so ancient, so vast. You can only join it. My breath hitched. Join it, not fight it. This was the revelation that had twisted my insides into a knot. I'd always imagined Alara as a victim, a recluse consumed by something she couldn't comprehend. But her words painted a different picture, one of a willing, albeit mad, participant. The communion must be absolute, a merging, a sacrifice of self to become more. The root offers not just life, but a new form of existence, a consciousness woven into the very fabric of this earth. It hungers, yes, but its hunger is for connection, for expansion. It seeks a host, a vessel to bridge the gap between its silent, subterranean world and the vibrant, sun-drenched surface. I pushed a hand through my hair, the grit of dust clinging to my scalp. My great-aunt, a botanist, had found her ultimate specimen, her final experiment, and she hadn't resisted. He had embraced it. She hadn't been trapped. He had chosen. The journal continued, its language growing more esoteric yet undeniably precise. It detailed a ritual, a process of assimilation. Not a violent struggle, but a deliberate surrender. Specific times, specific places within the manor, even the particular species of fungal growth that acted as a conduit. It was all there, laid out with the methodical precision of a scientific paper, overlaid with the frenzied devotion of a zealot. The bloom is ready. Tonight, under the final quarter moon, the offering must be made. The new vessel will be welcomed. The root will extend, and Blackwood Manor will truly awaken. The final quarter moon. I glanced at the small, grimy window high in the mess hall wall. A sliver of pale light, barely visible through the grime and the encroaching tendrils of the manor's internal flora, confirmed it. Tonight. A low thrumming vibrated through the floorboards. A sound I'd come to recognize as the manor's heartbeat. It wasn't a mechanical hum, but something organic, deep, resonating in my chest. The walls seemed to subtly shift, a faint, earthy groan echoing from the depths of the house. I felt it then, a palpable pressure in the air, a silent, demanding presence settling around me. The manor knew I had read it. It knew I understood. The choice Alara had faced, the choice he had made, was now mine. Succumb. Or find a final desperate means of escape. My mind reeled. Succumb? The idea was repulsive, a violation of everything I was. To lose myself, my thoughts, my very identity, to a parasitic, all-consuming entity. To become a root-bound puppet, another node in its vast subterranean network. The thought alone made my stomach clench. But escape? How? The manor was sealed. The doors were locked, the windows barred or overgrown. Every path I'd tried had led to another dead end, another wall of pulsating, fibrous growth. I was trapped in this mess hall, a prisoner in a house that was slowly but surely becoming a living, breathing, hungry organism. The thrumming intensified, vibrating up my legs through my spine. I could almost feel tendrils reaching for me from beneath the floor, from behind the walls, sensing my presence, my hesitation. Ilara's words echoed again. It hungers for connection, for expansion. And I was here, a fresh, unwilling connection. I was determined, yes, but determination felt like a fragile shield against the ancient, patient will of the manor. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about identity, about retaining the last vestiges of myself. I pushed myself up from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the pervasive hum. My eyes darted around the mess hall, searching, desperate. There had to be another way. There had to be. The alternative was unthinkable. It wasn't just my life at stake, but my very soul. But how do you fight something that has already consumed everything around you and now patiently waits to consume you too? The final quarter moon. Tonight. It was louder now, more insistent, like a gargantuan heart beating just beneath my feet. Thick, root-like growths, the color of bruised plums and wet earth, had sealed the heavy oak doors and barred the windows. They pulsed with a slow, internal light, a sickly green luminescence that cast shifting, distorted shadows across the peeling paint and the overturned chairs. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp soil, decay, and something else, something sweet and cloying, like overripe figs left to rot in the sun, mixed with a faint metallic tang. I could taste it on my tongue, a grimy coating that no amount of swallowing could dislodge. My great-aunt Ilara. Her legacy wasn't just Blackwood Manor. It was this living, breathing, consuming thing. I gripped the makeshift torch, a sturdy branch wrapped in oil-soaked rags, its flame sputtering weakly against the oppressive humidity. My hands were slick with sweat, my knuckles white. This was it. The final stand. The house had been tightening its grip, slowly, insidiously, since the moment I stepped across its threshold. The thrumming intensified, a deep bass note that vibrated my teeth. One of the larger tendrils, thick as a man's thigh, snaked down from the ceiling, its fleshy surface glistening. It was seeking, searching. For me. I knew it. It had been calling to me, a silent siren song that had slowly eroded my will, blurred the edges of my sanity. But no more. Not tonight. I'd seen it before, just another sign of the manor's decay, but now it seemed different. It beckoned. Or perhaps it was an exit, a weakness in the root's armor. My only chance. As I approached, the thrumming surged, and the air crackled with an unseen energy. The tendrils in the room seemed to writhe with renewed vigor, their tips twitching, extending. A smaller, whip-like growth lashed out, catching my ankle. I cried out, stumbling, the torch nearly slipping from my grasp. It tightened, digging into my skin. Panic flared, raw and desperate. I hacked at it with the torch, the flame searing the plant material, which recoiled with a hiss like steam escaping a pipe. A pungent, acrid smoke filled the air, stinging my eyes. I reached the cavity, shoving my arm into the cool, damp earth. It was deeper than I'd imagined, a tunnel, not just a hole. But as my fingers scrabbled for purchase, something strange happened. A sudden, overwhelming understanding flooded my mind, not as a thought, but as a sensation. It was a memory, vast and ancient, yet intimately personal. I saw Ilara, not as my reclusive great-aunt, but as a young woman, her face alight with a terrible fascination, tracing the outline of a similar cavity in the manor's oldest foundations. I saw her tending, nurturing, feeding the nascent tendrils with a devotion that bordered on madness. And then, the reveal. It wasn't just a garden he was tending. It was a symbiotic relationship. The manor wasn't just infested by this entity. It was the entity. And Ilara hadn't died of it. He had become part of it. Her consciousness, her memories, her very essence, woven into the vast, sprawling root system, a living memory bank. And now, the same process was happening to me. The tendril on my ankle pulsed, not just gripping, but integrating. I felt a strange tingling, then a dull ache, then a warmth spreading up my leg. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was a mental one. It was the manor's consciousness, Ilara's consciousness, reaching out, pulling me in. No! I roared, the sound raw and desperate, my voice hoarse against the thrumming. I thrashed, kicking wildly, tearing at the tendril with my free hand, ignoring the searing pain as it scraped against my skin. This wasn't escape. This was surrender. I pulled my arm from the cavity, a desperate last-ditch effort. My fingers, as they emerged, were no longer entirely mine. They pulsed faintly with the same sickly green light as the tendrils on the walls. The horror wasn't just outside anymore. It was in me. It had already taken root. The thrumming reached a crescendo, a deafening roar that vibrated through every cell of my body. The mess hall walls seemed to breathe, to heave. I stumbled back, away from the cavity, away from the grasping tendrils, away from the overwhelming influx of Ilara's memories, the manor's hunger. I had to. But even as I thought it, I felt the new growths in my hand, a part of me, yet utterly alien. I burst through a weakened section of a sealed doorway, the wood splintering with a groan, ignoring the scraping tendrils that tore at my clothes and skin. I had escaped the mess hall, perhaps even the manor itself for now. But as I ran, I could feel it, deep inside, a nascent seed, pulsing with a slow, undeniable rhythm. The root had found its new host, and Blackwood Manor, its ancient evil unbroken, would wait.